is 1:37 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is June 16th. I am Butch. It is June 16th and I am Butch. I was Butch yesterday. I've been Butch for over 10 years. I was probably Butch as a child. I have my Butch monthly t-shirt from when I was going to these monthly Butch meetings with this white Butch who I just don't really like very much enough to tell you. But I met a lot of really nice people and someone that I was dating. I don't remember if we met there or like we went to the first one together, but one of my close friends I met through this thing that I went to for a year. And I recently got a copy of the Lesbian Connection, which is the oldest, I would say kind of like a magazine of sorts, that is still in circulation. There used to be a lot of lesbian magazines. Some of them were like secret societies, like the Daughters of Bilitis, and some of them were more on the low, and also on the high, like On Your Backs. I would love a copy of On Your Backs. If anyone has one, you can DM me or we could talk about it. But I do love an internet archive, so I find butches everywhere. But I'm also like deeply, deeply a seeker. And if someone tells me no, I don't like that. So consent's very important. I'm not talking in that context. I am meaning people who gatekeep and they're like, you have to pay for this. Here's a paywall. You have to do this. I'm like, I'm going to find a way to get this for free and you can suck a fuck. And they do because I find it and then I share it to people. And that's what I'm doing now. And the Lesbian Connection, somebody who I don't know how old they are. I don't need to know. But she had said that she's looking for resources on learning more about butchness and how she feels like butches are dying out and that we're lost and that it's hard to find us. Here's what I think is happening. What I know is happening is that people who don't want to or unable to be or not with it enough to be culturally aware of where the word butch comes from and de facto where the word femme comes from. And then they're like, well, I'm not that. Even though they don't know anything, they have no context for it, and they choose not to use it. But other countries and other places, including a lot of non-English speaking places specifically, they don't use the word butch. They say things like tomboy, like in Spain and in Brazil. They say words like marica, which is like fag, but for a lady, which I feel like that's me, even though I'm agender as fuck. Other countries use specific words that they take back, which is what butch and stud are. Stud is for black people because stud, like male studs, are still used as an animalistic breeding term, which was used during slavery. And black people have used that, specifically black Americans, because I'm Caribbean and I'm half black. I don't identify as a stud because I don't have that lived experience of being a black American, but some black Caribbeans still call themselves studs because they're still black. I'm in a very, very niche, being bright skinned where the white balance is affected by my fuck. Oh, hello. Well, this is what I'd like to say. Being butch is a blue collar term. Being blue collar means that you don't work in an office usually. If you are of blue collar descent, usually that means that your family is blue collar. So that means you have family that didn't go to school. Or if they did, it was for a trade. And if they went to school for a trade, then they did that trade. And you likely will also be assumed you're going into that trade. And it is a very white thing to do in Europe to have women working in male fields and calling them butch, because butch used to be the word that you would use for the man's man. Butch and polari, which I always say polari, but I'm not really sure if I'm correct. Polari is a kind of dialect, a queer dialect. This is where we get the word camp from. This is where we get words like dish and surveying, and tea, just to name a lot of things. But it was a merchant mariner language used for safety reasons. So if you're talking to someone on the street, you're not going to hear their grinder notification, right? And if two gay men were caught sleeping together or talking about sleeping together in public, they would get thrown in prison or killed or both or tortured or more. So it was a language of exclusion to exclude people who didn't know what they were talking about, which is also why it's hard to find resources about it. And within Polari were words that were used in plain sight to describe certain men who were safe to walk at night with, to be outside with. And it wasn't always just butch as in masculine, it was butch as in like serving and protecting, which is where they would call butch lesbians mostly, masculine center queer women, and non binary people, but that's not a word that was used then. But if they were working in a factory and they were working on the floor and they had to wear certain clothes and they cut their hair short for safety, they were called butch. And then femme actually came from Parisian lesbian culture in the lesbian literary salon times, which I'm trying to redo. I don't know about you. So butch and femme became the words to describe masculine presenting, mostly women, almost exclusively working class. And then you would get tomboys who were like rich, or people who can hide behind the wealth and the status that they have. And I have resources for these things. There are also genderqueer people who use these terms interchangeably, like butch, tomboy, man, boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, lady, tough guy, right? All words to describe maybe even just one person or someone's partner or lover. There is a beautiful documentary that I watched that has changed my life fundamentally, and it's called Nellie and Nadine. Nellie and Nadine, I feel like, are the most symbiotic representations of queerness that I've ever seen, but in my opinion, the movie has very little to do with queerness and butchness. But Nadine, I believe it was. Yeah, Nadine was a biracial butch with a Flemish mother and a Chinese diplomat father, and was raised in Spain, went back to China, came back, went to France, became one of the lovers of Natalie Clifford Barney, who is like the weirdest historical lesbian I've ever read of in my life, and was her chauffeur. And one of the little snips that I see about Nadine was just that she was very handsome and beautiful and gorgeous, and no one in their right mind would get their hands off of her. And it's this really interesting understanding of butchness, which is you were excluded by everybody except for the people who want you included. And a lot of the time it's people who lust after you. That's a monitoring spirit if I've ever seen one. That was a really loud buzzing sound. So that is just one of many, many things that I can share. I completely ruined my white balance by trying to fix it. But there's a lot of really beautiful things available to you as a butch, including things like the lesbian connection, and butch is not a dirty word, and epily photography, and anything really that involves butchness requires an attempt to know that you belong somewhere. And when you don't feel like you belong anywhere, of course you're not going to go out of your way to call yourself one. And for anyone who sees this as a threat existentially to who they are as a mask, notice this is the first time I'm saying that today. And you enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope that you will become a well-read, wonderful, woo-woo ass butch like myself. Goodbye.